The stagecoach lurched to a violent stop in front of the dusty depot, and Lucy Sullivan pressed her gloved hand against the worn leather seat, heart hammering as she peered through the small window at the town of Hachita, New Mexico territory, wondering if the man waiting for her would notice that she could barely speak 3 words without stammering through them like a broken music box. The year was 1882, and the journey from Boston had taken nearly 2 weeks, each mile carrying her farther from the suffocating memory of her father's debts and the men who would have claimed her to settle them. The advertisement in the Eastern newspaper had seemed like Providence itself. Rancher seeking companionship and partnership, must be of good character and willing heart. When she had responded, her letter had been carefully crafted over days, each word selected and written in her finest penmanship, because her pen never stuttered the way her tongue did. The driver opened the door and offered his weathered hand. Lucy gathered her worn carpetbag and stepped down into the bright New Mexico sun. The heat was different here, dry and immediate, nothing like the humid summers of Massachusetts. Dust coated everything, from the wooden buildings lining the single main street to the handful of horses tied to hitching posts. Mountains rose in the distance, purple and imposing against the endless blue sky. "Miss Sullivan." The voice was deep, patient, and came from directly behind her. Lucy turned and found herself looking up at a man who stood well over 6 feet tall. He had dark hair that fell slightly past his collar, sun-bronzed skin, and eyes the color of warm honey. His clothes were simple but clean: a cotton shirt rolled to his elbows, dark trousers, worn boots, and a hat he held respectfully in his hands. He looked to be perhaps 30 years old, maybe a few years younger, and there was a gentleness in his expression that immediately eased some of the tightness in her chest. "Why, yes," Lucy managed, feeling her face flush as the word caught in her throat. I'm Lucy S. Sullivan." She watched for it, the thing that always came. The impatience, the confusion, the judgment, sometimes even mockery. Her stepmother had called it an affliction. The schoolteacher in Boston had called it a defect. The man her father had tried to marry her off to had called it intolerable. But the rancher just smiled, a slow, warm expression that reached his eyes. He extended his hand. "Miss Sullivan, I am very pleased to meet you. My name is James Morrison, and I have all the time you need." Lucy felt something shift inside her chest, like a door opening to let in light. She placed her hand in his, and his grip was warm and steady. Thank you," she whispered. "The ride to the ranch is about an hour," James said, releasing her hand and gesturing toward a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 horses. "I brought cushions for the seat and packed some water and food if you are hungry after your journey. I imagine the stagecoach does not provide much comfort." As he spoke, Lucy noticed that his words came measured and calm, never rushed. He did not fill every silence with unnecessary chatter, and when he paused, it felt natural rather than expectant. He collected her larger trunk from the back of the stagecoach, handling it as though it weighed nothing, and secured it in the wagon bed. James helped her onto the seat, and Lucy arranged her travel-worn skirts as he walked around to the other side. The town of Hachita was small, smaller than she had imagined. A general store, a saloon, what looked like a boarding house, and a few other buildings she could not quite identify. A handful of people moved about their business, and several glanced at the wagon with open curiosity. "Hachita is not much," James said as he urged the horses forward. "But the people are mostly decent, and the general store can get nearly anything from Las Cruces if you give them enough time. The nearest church is actually a traveling minister who comes through once a month, but if you are of a religious inclination, there is a small gathering of families who meet on Sundays at the schoolhouse." Lucy nodded, grateful that he was providing information without requiring much response from her. She studied his profile as he drove. His jaw was strong, clean-shaven, and there was a small scar above his left eyebrow that she found herself wondering about. "And may I ask," she started, then paused, gathering her courage. "How long have you been ranching?" "My father started the ranch about 25 years ago," James said, his voice carrying a note of something complicated, neither quite pride nor quite sorrow. "He passed 3 years ago. My mother died when I was young. I have been running the place myself since then, with the help of 2 hired men, Miguel and his son Carlos. They are good people. You will like them." The landscape opened up as they left the town behind. Vast stretches of grassland dotted with scrub brush and occasional clusters of trees lined a creek bed. The mountains provided a dramatic backdrop, and Lucy found the openness both terrifying and exhilarating. In Boston, buildings crowded close, and even the parks felt contained. Here the sky seemed impossibly large. What do you raise?" Lucy asked, finding that speaking to someone who did not rush her made the words come slightly easier, though the stutter remained. "Cattle mostly," James said. "Some horses. We have chickens and a few pigs near the house. The land is good for grazing, and there is a reliable water source that runs through the property. It is not an easy life, Miss Sullivan, and I will not pretend otherwise. The work is constant, the weather can be harsh, and we are somewhat isolated. But there is a freedom to it and a satisfaction in building something with your own hands." Lucy appreciated his honesty. The letters they had exchanged had been cordial but brief. She knew he was a rancher, unmarried and seeking a wife. He knew she was educated, skilled in household management, and had no family obligations keeping her in the East. What he did not know, what she had not been able to write, was about her stutter. She had tried several times to mention it in her letters, but each attempt had felt inadequate. How did one explain in writing the way words could become trapped, the way her mouth would betray her at the worst moments? I should tell you," Lucy began, her hands twisting in her lap. "In my letters I did not mention your speech." James said gently, not looking at her, keeping his eyes on the road ahead. "I noticed, Miss Sullivan, and I meant what I said. I have all the time you need, always." Lucy blinked against sudden tears. The relief was so powerful it left her breathless. "Most people don't." "Most people are fools then," James said simply. "You communicate just fine. Anyone with a measure of patience can see that." They rode in companionable silence for a while. Lucy watched the landscape, noting the occasional cattle in the distance, the hawks circling overhead, the way the shadows fell long even though it was only late afternoon. The air smelled different here, clean and sharp with sage. "The ranch house is not fancy," James said as they crested a low rise. Below them, nestled in a valley with a creek running beside it, stood a modest wooden structure. It was single-story with a covered porch, larger than a cabin but smaller than the grand homes Lucy had seen in Boston. Outbuildings dotted the area around it: a barn, a stable, what looked like a bunkhouse, and several smaller sheds. But it is solid and well-maintained. 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, a main room. I have been doing my own cooking and cleaning, so I am afraid it probably lacks a woman's touch. As they approached, 2 men emerged from the barn. One was older, perhaps in his 50s, with silver threading through his dark hair. The younger was likely in his 20s, bearing a strong resemblance to the older man. Both wore working clothes and had the lean, weathered look of men who spent their lives outdoors. "Miguel Carlos," James called as he brought the wagon to a stop in front of the house. "This is Miss Lucy Sullivan from Boston." Miguel removed his hat and offered a respectful nod. "Welcome, Miss Sullivan. "It is good to have you here." Carlos echoed his father's greeting, his English carrying a stronger accent. Lucy smiled at them both, managing a quiet, "Thank you." If they noticed her stutter, neither man gave any indication. James helped her down from the wagon while Miguel and Carlos moved to unload her trunk. "Let me show you the house," James said, leading her up the 3 steps to the porch. "You can choose whichever bedroom you prefer. I have been using the one on the east side, but I can move my things if you would rather have that one. It gets the morning sun." The interior of the house was dim after the bright sunlight, and Lucy's eyes needed a moment to adjust. The main room was spacious, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall, a worn but comfortable-looking sofa and 2 chairs arranged before it. A dining table with 6 chairs sat near the kitchen area. Everything was tidy, if a bit sparse in decoration. The wooden floors were swept clean and the windows, though small, were clear. James showed her through the house. The kitchen had a good iron stove, a deep sink with a pump, and adequate shelving stocked with basic supplies. 2 bedrooms opened off the main room, both modestly furnished with a bed, a dresser, and a small wardrobe. The 3rd bedroom was being used for storage, filled with trunks, tools, and odds and ends. "It is very nice," Lucy said, and she meant it. The house felt solid, honest, like the man who owned it. "I will leave you to settle in," James said, pausing at the door of the bedroom she had indicated, the one that faced west toward the mountains. "Take whatever time you need. I have evening chores to attend to, but I will be back to make supper, unless you would prefer to rest, in which case I can bring something to you." "And no," Lucy said quickly. "IW would like to help with supper." James smiled at that, and Lucy was struck again by how the expression transformed his face, making him seem younger, less burdened. "I would be glad of the company. The kitchen is yours to explore. I will return in an hour or so." After he left, Lucy sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself a long, shaky breath. The room smelled faintly of cedar and dust. She could hear the sounds of the ranch through the window, cattle lowing in the distance, horses whinnying, men's voices calling to one another. It was all so foreign, so far from everything she had known, but James Morrison had said he had all the time she needed. And in that simple statement, Lucy felt something she had not felt in years: hope. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her 2 spare dresses in the wardrobe and arranging her personal items on the dresser. The photograph of her mother, who had died when Lucy was 12, took pride of place. Her mother had been patient too, Lucy remembered. She had never made Lucy feel broken. When Lucy entered the kitchen an hour later, she found it empty but heard sounds from outside. She located an apron hanging on a hook and tied it around her waist, then began investigating the supplies. The pantry held flour, cornmeal, dried beans, salt pork, and various other staples. Root vegetables filled a bin. It was a bachelor's kitchen, functional but uninspired. Lucy found a mixing bowl and began preparing biscuits, a recipe she knew by heart. The familiar motion of measuring and mixing was soothing, and she lost herself in the work. She located a pot and started beans soaking, though they would take too long for tonight. Instead, she found eggs in a basket on the counter and decided on scrambled eggs to accompany the biscuits. There was even a jar of preserves in the pantry, peach, if the label was accurate. She was pulling the biscuits from the oven when the door opened and James entered, bringing with him the smell of hay and horses. He stopped when he saw the table set, the food steaming, and something in his expression softened. "Miss Sullivan, you did not have to do all this after such a long journey." I wanted to," Lucy said, meaning it. "And please call me Lucy." "Then you must call me James," he said, moving to wash his hands at the kitchen pump. "And I must say, this looks considerably better than anything I have produced recently. My cooking tends toward the merely edible." They sat down together, and James said a brief, simple grace. The biscuits had turned out well, golden and flaky, and the eggs were fluffy with some wild herbs Lucy had found hanging dried in the kitchen. As they ate, James told her more about the ranch, about the rhythms of the work, about Miguel and Carlos and their families who lived in two small houses on the property. Miguel's wife, Rosa, passed 2 years ago, James explained. She was a wonderful woman, and her loss was hard on them both. Carlos is not married yet, though there is a young woman in Hachita, Maria Sanchez, who I suspect interests him. He rides into town more frequently than necessary. Lucy smiled at that. "Why young love, perhaps," James agreed. "I hope so. Carlos is a good man. He deserves happiness." "And why you?" Lucy asked, surprising herself with her boldness. "Why did you and never marry B before now?" James was quiet for a moment, finishing his biscuit. "The truth is, I was engaged once about 5 years ago. Her name was Catherine. She was from one of the other ranching families, and we had known each other since childhood. But when my father became ill, she found the reality of ranch life less romantic than the idea of it. She married a banker from Las Cruces instead." I am sorry," Lucy said softly. "Do not be," James said, meeting her eyes. "I have made my peace with it. Catherine wanted a different life, an easier life, and there is nothing wrong with that. But I realized I needed someone who understood that this life, this land, is in my blood. I cannot leave it. I will not leave it. So when I decided to try again, I wanted to be clear about what I was offering. No false promises. No pretending it will be something it is not." Lucy understood. He was offering her honesty, which was more than most men offered any woman. I understand. "And I want you to know. I am not looking for something easy. I am looking for somewhere I see can belong. I hope you will find that here," James said quietly. They cleaned up together, James washing while Lucy dried, and the domesticity of it felt strange and comfortable all at once. When everything was put away, James showed her the bathing room, a lean-to attached to the back of the house with a large tin tub and a stove for heating water. "I will heat water for you if you wish to bathe," he offered. "The journey from Boston cannot have been comfortable." Lucy accepted gratefully, and James proved as good as his word, filling the tub with steaming water before discreetly withdrawing. Lucy sank into the bath with a sigh of relief, washing away the dust and exhaustion of travel. The soap was plain but serviceable, and there was even a bottle of lavender water on a small shelf that she used sparingly in her hair. When she finally emerged, dressed in her nightgown and wrapper, her hair braided for sleep, she found James sitting on the porch, a cup of coffee in his hands, gazing out at the darkening landscape. The sun had set, leaving the sky painted in shades of purple and gold. "Good night," Lucy said softly from the doorway. James turned and stood. "Good night, Lucy. Sleep well. If you need anything in the night, my door will be open." Lucy retired to her room, and despite the strangeness of the bed and the newness of everything, she fell asleep almost immediately, lulled by the sounds of the ranch and the feeling, for the first time in years, of being safe. The next morning, Lucy woke to the sound of a rooster crowing and soft voices outside. The sun was just beginning to lighten the sky. She dressed quickly in one of her work dresses and ventured out to find James already in the kitchen, coffee brewing on the stove. Good morning," she said. "Good morning," James replied, pouring her a cup of coffee without asking, somehow knowing she would want one. "I hope the rooster did not wake you too early. He is enthusiastic about his job." Lucy smiled, accepting the cup. It is F fine. I want to learn the R rhythms here. Over the next weeks, Lucy did exactly that. She learned that James rose before dawn every day, that Miguel and Carlos arrived shortly after to begin the morning work of feeding animals and checking on the cattle. She learned that Wednesdays, James rode the property lines, checking fences and looking for any problems. She learned that he was patient not just with her speech but with everything, that he never raised his voice even when things went wrong, that he treated Miguel and Carlos with genuine respect. And James learned about Lucy. He learned that she was an excellent cook, that she had a talent for organization that transformed his chaotic storage room into an orderly space, that she sang softly to herself when she worked, never stuttering when she sang. He learned that she was educated, that she could read and write beautifully, that she had opinions about politics and literature that she shared haltingly but passionately. He learned that she was afraid of the dark, that she checked the locks on the doors twice each night, and though she never explained why, he made sure to leave a lamp burning in the hallway so she would not wake to complete darkness. One evening, about 3 weeks after her arrival, they sat together on the porch after supper. It had become their routine, this quiet time as the day cooled and the stars emerged. James had brought out his guitar, an instrument Lucy had not known he played, and was absently strumming soft melodies. Will you play something? Lucy asked. James considered, then began a song Lucy did not recognize, a gentle tune with a hint of melancholy. His voice was untrained but pleasant, and Lucy found herself closing her eyes just listening. When he finished, she opened her eyes to find him watching her. That W was beautiful. What is it C called? I do not know that it has a name, James said. My father used to play it. I think it was something his mother taught him. Family music passed down. F family, Lucy repeated softly. The word carried weight. James set the guitar aside carefully. Lucy, I want to ask you something, and I want you to know there is no pressure in the asking. You have been here nearly a month now, and I hope you have felt welcome, but I realize we have not discussed the future directly. Lucy's heart began to beat faster. I have felt very welcome. I am glad, James said. When I sent for a mail-order bride, I had expectations, I suppose. I thought I knew what I was looking for. But having you here, getting to know you, has been different than I imagined. Better. I find myself looking forward to our evenings, to hearing what you think about things, to watching you move through the house and make it a home in ways I never managed. What I am trying to say, rather badly, is that I have developed feelings for you. Real feelings. Lucy could hardly breathe. Why you have, I have, James confirmed. And I would like to marry you properly, not as some arrangement but as a real marriage, but only if you want that too. If you need more time, if you want something different, if you have doubts, please tell me. I meant what I said that first day. I have all the time you need. Lucy felt tears prick her eyes. James, I have been dreading the moment when you would realize I am too much trouble. When my stutter would become an annoying or embarrassing. I have been waiting for the impatience, but it has not come. You make me feel like I am worth listening to. You are, James said firmly. Lucy, you are worth everything. I have feelings for you too, Lucy whispered. I think I started having them that first day when you said you had all the tea time. James reached over and took her hand gently. Then let us make this real. Let us be married properly, build this life together. What do you say? Why, yes, Lucy said, and the word came out clear and strong. Yes. James smiled, that transforming smile that Lucy had come to love, and raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles softly. Then we will go into town tomorrow and arrange it with the traveling minister. He should be through in a few days. That night, Lucy lay in bed, too excited to sleep. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, about the desperation that had driven her to answer an advertisement from a stranger in a distant territory. She thought about her father, who had drunk himself into debt and death, about her stepmother who had made her feel like a burden, about all the people who had treated her stutter like a failing of character rather than simply the way her words sometimes came. And then she thought about James, about his patience and his kindness, about the way he looked at her like she was something precious. She thought about building a life here, in this wild, beautiful place, with a man who had all the time in the world for her. The wedding took place 4 days later in the small schoolhouse where the community gathered. The traveling minister, Reverend Samuel Hendricks, performed the ceremony with Miguel, Carlos, and several neighboring ranching families in attendance. Lucy wore her best dress, a simple blue cotton that she had carefully pressed, and James wore a suit that he admitted he had purchased years ago for his failed engagement but had never worn. "Seems right to give it a happier memory," he had said when Lucy expressed concern about that. Carlos had picked wildflowers, creating a simple bouquet that Lucy clutched with trembling hands as she stood beside James. When the minister asked if she took this man to be her husband, Lucy looked into James's warm eyes and said, I do," and he squeezed her hand gently. When James said his vows, his voice was steady and sure. "I do." The minister pronounced them married, and James kissed her softly, chastely, and Lucy felt the world shift beneath her feet. She was married. She was Lucy Morrison now. She belonged somewhere. She belonged to someone who chose her, knowing all her imperfections. The small community had organized a celebration afterward with food and music. Lucy met neighbors she had only heard mentioned, women who welcomed her warmly and men who congratulated James on his good fortune. A fiddler played, and James surprised Lucy by asking her to dance. I don't know if I can," Lucy protested, but James simply smiled. "I will lead. You just follow, no talking required." And he did lead, gently and surely, guiding her through the simple steps. Lucy stumbled a few times, but James never faltered, never showed frustration, just adjusted and kept moving. By the end of the song, Lucy was breathless and laughing. When they returned home that evening as the sun set, James carried her over the threshold, which made Lucy laugh again. He set her down gently in the main room, and suddenly they were alone together as husband and wife, and the air felt charged with possibility and nervousness. "I want you to know," Lucy began, her face flushing. "I have never." "Nor have I," James admitted quietly, which surprised Lucy. "Catherine and I never. She wanted to wait, and then it ended. There has been no one else." The admission made Lucy love him more somehow. They were both entering this unknown territory together. James reached out and cupped her face gently. "We have all the time we need. There is no rush. Let us just be together, and everything else will happen as it should." And it did. James was patient and gentle, and Lucy found that her stutter disappeared entirely in whispered intimacies, that her body spoke a language more fluid than her tongue ever had. They learned each other slowly, carefully, with tenderness and growing passion. When Lucy finally fell asleep in her husband's arms, she felt completely, utterly at peace. The months that followed were among the happiest of Lucy's life. She fully settled into her role as James's wife, as the woman of the ranch. She planted a garden that thrived under her care, producing vegetables that supplemented their meals. She learned to preserve food for winter, to make cheese and butter, to manage the chickens and gather eggs. Miguel's daughter-in-law, Elena, who lived in town but visited frequently, became a good friend, patiently teaching Lucy the skills she needed. James, in turn, taught Lucy to ride. He started her on a gentle mare named Daisy, and though Lucy was terrified at first, James's patience never wavered. He walked beside her for hours, holding the lead rope, talking her through her fear. Eventually, Lucy learned to ride on her own, and the freedom of it was exhilarating. She would ride out to where James was working sometimes, bringing him lunch, and they would sit together under the vast sky and talk. Have you ever wanted to leave here? Lucy asked one afternoon as they sat by the creek, their horses grazing nearby. Go somewhere bigger, somewhere with more opportunities. James considered the question seriously, as he considered all her questions. When I was younger, maybe. I thought about seeing cities, oceans, all the things my father used to talk about from his traveling days. But the older I get, the more I realize that those things are not what matter to me. This land matters. Building something that will last matters. And now, being with you matters most of all. Lucy leaned against his shoulder and he wrapped his arm around her. I never thought would find this. Someone who makes me feel whole. You were always whole, Lucy, James said softly. You just needed someone who could see it. As fall turned to winter, the ranch work shifted to different rhythms. The cattle were brought closer to the ranch buildings. Additional hay was stored, and preparations were made for the cold months ahead. Lucy had never experienced a New Mexico winter, and she found it milder than Boston winters, but no less demanding in its own way. It was during this time that Lucy discovered she was pregnant. The realization came gradually: the missed courses, the morning sickness, the tenderness. Alina confirmed it when Lucy finally worked up the courage to ask, and the older woman embraced her warmly. This is wonderful news. Have you told James? Lucy shook her head. And not yet. I want to find the right moment. That evening after supper, as they sat by the fire, Lucy reached over and took James's hand. He looked at her curiously, setting down the book he had been reading. James, she began. I have something to tell you. What is it? He asked, giving her his full attention as he always did. I am going to have a baby, Lucy said, the words tumbling out. We are going to have a baby. James's eyes widened, and for a moment he seemed unable to speak. Then a smile spread across his face, the biggest, most joyful smile Lucy had ever seen from him. Lucy, are you certain? She nodded. Alina helped me confirm it. In the summer, we will have a child. James pulled her into his arms, holding her close. This is the best news, the absolute best. Lucy, you have made me so happy. Why you are not worried? Lucy asked, pulling back to look at him. About me, about childbirth. Of course I am concerned, James admitted, but we will get through it together. Alina has delivered countless babies. We will make sure you have everything you need. And Lucy, you are strong, stronger than you know. The pregnancy progressed, and Lucy bloomed with it. James became even more attentive, insisting she rest more, taking on additional household tasks despite her protests. Miguel and Carlos treated the impending birth like it was happening in their own family. And Carlos even began building a cradle in the barn, working on it during his spare moments. As winter gave way to spring, Lucy's belly grew, and she felt the baby move and kick. James would place his hand on her stomach in the evenings, marveling at each movement, talking softly to the child. Your mother is the strongest, most beautiful woman in the world, he would say, and you are already so loved. But spring also brought challenges. A late frost killed some of the early plants in Lucy's garden. Several cattle were lost to illness. A section of fence was destroyed in a storm, requiring extensive repairs. The work was endless and demanding, and Lucy worried about adding the burden of a baby to James's already heavy load. I am sorry, she said one evening after a particularly difficult day. Why you have so much to worry about, and then now this. James knelt beside her chair and took both her hands. Lucy Morrison, you listen to me. This baby, our child, is not a burden. This baby is joy. This baby is hope. This baby is the future. Everything else, all the work and worry, that is just life. But this, you and our child, this is what makes the work meaningful. Do you understand? Lucy nodded, tears streaming down her face, and James held her, letting her cry out her fears and hormones and exhaustion. The baby came on a hot June afternoon. Lucy's water broke while she was kneading bread, and the contractions started soon after. James sent Carlos racing to town for Alina while he helped Lucy to the bedroom, his face pale but determined to remain calm for her sake. Alina arrived within an hour, calm and efficient. She sent James out of the room despite his protests, and Lucy labored through the long afternoon and into the evening. The pain was intense, primal, unlike anything she had experienced. But Alina coached her through it, and Lucy found that in the moments of greatest intensity, her stutter disappeared entirely, replaced by raw, guttural sounds of effort. Finally, as the sun was setting, Lucy gave one last tremendous push, and the baby emerged. Alina worked quickly, and then Lucy heard it, the sharp, indignant cry of her child. "It is a boy," Alina announced, quickly cleaning the baby and wrapping him in soft cloth. "A healthy boy." She placed the baby on Lucy's chest, and Lucy looked down at the tiny, red-faced creature who had just entered the world. He had dark hair like his father and was screaming with impressive volume. Lucy felt a wave of love so powerful it was almost painful. "Hello," she whispered to her son. I am your mother." Alina allowed James in shortly after, and he entered the room with visible trepidation, his eyes immediately going to Lucy. "Are you all right?" I am perfect," Lucy said, meaning it. "Come and meet your son." James approached slowly as if in a dream and looked down at the baby in Lucy's arms. His face transformed, and Lucy saw tears streak down her husband's cheeks. "He is perfect. Lucy, he is absolutely perfect." What should we name him?" Lucy asked. They had discussed names but never settled on one. James reached out and gently touched the baby's tiny hand, and the baby's fingers reflexively curled around his father's finger. "Thomas," James said softly, "after my father, Thomas Michael Morrison, if that is all right with you." "T. Thomas," Lucy repeated. "It is perfect." The days after Thomas's birth were exhausting and overwhelming and wonderful all at once. Lucy's body ached, the baby needed constant attention, and she was utterly unprepared for the intensity of motherhood despite all her reading and Alina's advice. But James was there for every moment. He changed diapers, walked the floor with Thomas when he cried, brought Lucy meals in bed, and told her she was beautiful even when she felt completely undone. Miguel and Carlos were smitten with the baby, stopping by frequently to check on everyone and bring small gifts, a rattle Carlos had carved, a soft blanket Rosa had made before her death. The neighboring families visited with food and congratulations, and Lucy felt embraced by this community in ways she had never experienced in Boston. As Thomas grew from a newborn to an infant, Lucy found her rhythm as a mother. She learned to interpret his different cries, to nurse him efficiently even while managing other tasks, to nap when he napped. James would hold his son in the evenings, talking to him about the ranch, about the cattle, about everything and nothing, and Lucy would watch them together, her heart full. "He is going to be smart," Lucy said one evening, watching Thomas's alert eyes track a toy Carlos had brought. Look how he focuses." "He gets that from his mother," James said, smiling. "You are the smart one in this family, and he will be kind," Lucy continued. "Like his father." Thomas began to grow. hitting each milestone with Lucy and James watching in amazement. He learned to roll over, then to sit up, then to crawl. The house had to be adjusted for a mobile baby, and Lucy was constantly pulling him away from things he should not touch. But his personality emerged too. He was generally happy, quick to smile, and already showed signs of his father's patience, content to sit and observe for long periods. When Thomas was 8 months old, James had to make a trip to Las Cruces for supplies, an overnight journey. It would be the first time he had been away since Thomas's birth, and both he and Lucy were anxious about it. "We will be fine," Lucy assured him, though she was not entirely certain. "Miguel and Carlos are here if I need anything." "I know," James said, kissing her forehead, then Thomas's, "but I will still worry." He left at dawn, and Lucy waved from the porch, Thomas on her hip. The day proceeded normally enough. Lucy managed the household tasks, cared for Thomas, and prepared meals. But as evening fell and shadows lengthened, Lucy felt the old fear creeping back. The fear of the dark, of being alone, of vulnerability. She lit extra lamps and kept Thomas close. She was preparing for bed when she heard horses outside, multiple horses moving fast. Lucy's heart began to race. James was not due back until tomorrow. She quickly took Thomas to the bedroom and then went to the window, peering out carefully. 3 men on horseback had stopped in front of the house. They did not look like neighbors. Their clothes were rough, their manner aggressive even from a distance. One of them dismounted and began walking toward the house. Lucy's mind raced. Miguel and Carlos were in the bunkhouse on the other side of the property. They might not hear if she called. The man knocked hard on the door and Lucy jumped. "Hello in there. We need water for our horses." The man called. Lucy knew she could not simply ignore them. That would cause more suspicion. But she also knew that 3 strange men and a woman alone was a dangerous situation. She went to the door but did not open it. "My husband will be right here," she called through the door, hoping they would believe her. "He is in the bee barn." "We can wait," the man said, but he did not sound patient. Lucy's stutter was worse with fear, and she struggled to speak. The pee pump is by the bee barn." "Help yourself to water." There was a pause, then laughter. "Your husband in the barn, you say? Maybe we should go introduce ourselves." Lucy's blood ran cold. If they went to the barn and found no one, they would know she had lied. She frantically tried to think of what to do. Then she heard the most beautiful sound, the crack of a rifle being cocked. "The lady's husband is right here," came Miguel's voice from somewhere outside. "And he says you can water your horses and move on, quickly." Lucy heard cursing, then the sound of horses moving. She waited, barely breathing, until she heard Miguel's voice again, closer. "Mrs. Morrison, it is Miguel. They are gone." Lucy opened the door to find Miguel and Carlos, both armed, standing in the yard. Miguel's face was grim. "They were drifters, maybe worse. Are you all right?" "Why, yes," Lucy managed. Thank you why you so much." "Carlos is going to sleep on your porch tonight," Miguel said firmly, "and I will be watching. You are not alone, Mrs. Morrison, you are family." True to his word, Carlos brought a bedroll and settled on the porch, and Lucy went back inside, checking all the locks twice. She held Thomas close as she finally got into bed, and she did not sleep well, jumping at every sound. When James returned the next afternoon, Carlos and Miguel told him what had happened before Lucy could. James went pale and immediately found Lucy, pulling her into his arms. "I should never have left you. I am so sorry." "And no," Lucy said. "Why you had to go." "And Miguel and Carlos protected us. We were safe." But James was clearly shaken. That evening, after Thomas was asleep, he sat Lucy down. "I want to teach you to shoot. I should have done it already." I want you to know how to protect yourself and Thomas if something ever happens when I am not here." Over the following weeks, James patiently taught Lucy to handle a rifle and a revolver. She was not a natural shot, and the guns frightened her, but she understood the necessity. James never pushed, never lost patience with her learning curve, and eventually, Lucy could hit targets with reasonable accuracy. "I hope I never have to use it," Lucy said one afternoon after practice. "I hope so too," James agreed, "but I will sleep better knowing you can if you need to." Life continued. Thomas grew into a toddler, taking his first steps on a warm October morning, stumbling from Lucy's arms to James's across the kitchen floor. His first word was "da," and James's face lit up like the sun. His second word was "ma," but it came out without a stutter, and Lucy was grateful for that. As Thomas became more verbal, Lucy watched anxiously for any sign that he might have inherited her stutter. But his words came easily, and Lucy felt both relief and a strange, small sadness. She had wanted her son to be spared her difficulty, but a tiny part of her had thought that maybe if he shared it, he would understand her better. But Thomas understood his mother perfectly anyway. When Lucy struggled with a word, Thomas would wait patiently, his small face serious, never interrupting. He was, in this and many ways, very much his father's son. When Thomas was 2, Lucy discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect, or perhaps because she was chasing a toddler all day and had no time to worry. James was thrilled, and Thomas, though too young to fully understand, seemed to sense something important was happening. This time, the baby came quickly, too quickly for Alina to arrive from town. Lucy labored for only a few hours before the baby crowned, and James, pale but determined, delivered his own daughter with Lucy coaching him through it. When the baby girl emerged, wailing and healthy, James cut the cord with shaking hands and placed her on Lucy's chest. "Why you did it," Lucy said, exhausted and proud. "Why you delivered our daughter." "We did it," James corrected, and he was crying again. "Lucy, we have a daughter." They named her Sarah Rose Morrison, and she had her mother's delicate features and her father's eyes. Thomas was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to touch her constantly, and Lucy had to teach him to be gentle. With 2 children, life on the ranch became even busier. Lucy's days were full from dawn to dusk, but she had never been happier. James hired additional help, a young man named Peter who had just arrived in New Mexico territory and needed work, so that Miguel and Carlos could focus more on the cattle and James could spend more time with his family. The ranch prospered. James made good decisions, the land was generous, and the cattle herds grew. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, and there was always enough. James added a room to the house for the children, and Lucy planted more in her garden each year. The traveling minister came regularly, and the Morrison family never missed a service. When Sarah was 1 and Thomas nearly 4, Lucy had a moment that she would remember for the rest of her life. They were all outside, James teaching Thomas to ride on a gentle old gelding while Lucy sat in the shade with Sarah on her lap. The sun was warm, a breeze carried the scent of sage, and the mountains stood purple in the distance. Lucy looked at her husband, patient and kind, guiding their son's small hands on the reins. She looked at Thomas, serious and determined, so like his father. She looked down at Sarah, dozing peacefully in her arms, and she felt a wave of gratitude so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. She had come here nearly 5 years ago, terrified and stuttering, expecting at best a tolerable arrangement. Instead, she had found love, real and deep and lasting. She had found purpose. She had found home. Mama see cry," Thomas called, noticing her tears from across the yard. "Happy tears," Lucy called back. "Jay just happy." James looked over and smiled, that smile that still made her heart skip. He said something to Thomas, then dismounted and walked over, sitting beside Lucy in the shade. He put his arm around her, careful not to disturb the sleeping baby. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. How different my life could have been," Lucy said honestly. "If you had not been patient, if you had not been kind." "I think about that too sometimes," James admitted. "About what I would have missed if you had not taken a chance on a lonely rancher in the middle of nowhere. Lucy, you have given me everything. A real home, children, love. Before you came, I was just existing, just going through the motions. Now I am living." Lucy leaned against him, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching Thomas practice his riding. Sarah stirred and woke, and James took her from Lucy's arms, holding his daughter with the practiced ease of an experienced father. "Papa, watch." Thomas called, and James turned his attention to his son, praising the boy's improving skills. The years continued to unfold. Thomas grew tall and strong, taking after his father in build and temperament. He learned ranching alongside James, proving to have a natural talent with animals. Sarah was different, more bookish, and Lucy taught her to read when she was just 4 years old. The little girl consumed books the way her brother consumed time outdoors, and Lucy ordered books from back east, building a small library in the house. When Thomas was 8 and Sarah nearly 5, Lucy became pregnant a third time. This pregnancy was harder, and Lucy felt her age, now 32, in ways she had not before. The baby came early, a small but healthy boy they named Daniel James Morrison, and his arrival seemed to complete their family. Daniel was a cheerful baby, easy and content, and his siblings doted on him. Thomas would carry him around carefully, showing him the ranch, talking to him constantly. Sarah would read to him, her little voice serious as she recited stories, and James and Lucy would watch their 3 children together, marveling at what they had created. The ranch continued to grow. James bought additional land from a retiring neighbor, expanding their grazing area. Miguel's son Carlos married his Maria and had children of their own, twin boys who were close in age to Daniel. The ranch became a kind of compound, multiple families working together, relying on each other. Lucy's stutter never disappeared, but it became less frequent, less severe. The confidence that came from James's unwavering acceptance, from being a mother, from having a place in the world, all worked to ease the tightness in her throat that had caused so many problems for so long. But in moments of stress or fear, it would return, and James's response never changed. He would wait, patient and attentive, giving her all the time she needed. When Thomas was 12, he asked his parents about Lucy's speech. It was evening, the younger children already in bed, and Thomas had stayed up to help his father with some paperwork. "Papa, why does mama talk different sometimes?" he asked, not meanly, just curious. James set down his pen and looked at his son seriously. "Your mother has something called a stutter. It is just the way her words come sometimes. It has nothing to do with how smart she is or how well she can communicate. It is just a thing about her, like the way you have a birthmark on your shoulder or the way Sarah is left-handed." "Does it bother her?" Thomas asked. "Sometimes," James admitted. "The world is not always kind to people who are different, but your mother is one of the strongest people I know. She came all the way from Boston to marry a man she had never met, built a life in a place totally foreign to her, and created this home, this family. Her stutter does not define her. Her courage does." Thomas thought about this. "I think mama is brave too, and I like the way she talks. It makes her seem like she is thinking carefully about her words. James smiled and ruffled his son's hair. That is a very wise way to look at it, and you are right. Your mother chooses her words carefully, which means when she speaks, it is worth listening to. Lucy, who had been standing just outside the room and had heard the entire conversation, felt tears streaming down her face. She had worried about what her children would think of her stutter, worried that they would be embarrassed or ashamed. But James had raised them to see it as simply a part of who she was, no more important than the color of her eyes. She entered the room, and both James and Thomas looked up. Mama," Thomas said, realizing she had been there. I did not mean to make you as sad." I am not as sad," Lucy assured him, embracing her son. "I am happy, so happy, more years passed." Thomas grew into a fine young man, responsible and hardworking, and there were conversations about him eventually taking over the ranch. Sarah's intelligence was remarkable, and Lucy and James began discussing sending her to a school in Las Cruces when she was older, though they hated the idea of being separated from her. Daniel was still young but showed signs of having his father's patience and his mother's thoughtfulness. Through it all, Lucy and James's love deepened. It was not the passionate, dramatic love of storybooks, though there was passion. It was the steady, enduring love of two people who had chosen each other every single day. It was the love of shared work and shared dreams, of inside jokes and comfortable silences, of knowing someone completely and loving them not despite their flaws but including them. On their 15th wedding anniversary, James gave Lucy a gift, a beautiful leather-bound journal with her initials embossed on the cover. "It is be beautiful," Lucy said, running her fingers over the smooth leather. But what is it F for?" "For your words," James said simply. "I know speaking can be hard sometimes, but your writing never stutters. I thought maybe you would like to write things down. Stories, thoughts, whatever you want. And maybe someday our children and their children can read it and know you, really know you." Lucy was speechless, which was perhaps appropriate. She opened the journal to find James had written an inscription on the first page. "For Lucy, who taught me that the best words are worth waiting for, all my love always, James." That night, Lucy made her first entry. Her handwriting was still as neat and clear as it had been when she had written those first careful letters to a rancher she had never met. She wrote about her journey from Boston, about her fears and hopes, about meeting James for the first time, and how he had said he had all the time she needed. She wrote about their wedding, about their children, about the life they had built together in this wild, beautiful place. And she continued writing, filling page after page over the months and years that followed. She wrote about the small moments and the significant ones, creating a record of a life fully lived. When Thomas was 18, he fell in love with Alina's granddaughter, a sweet young woman named Isabella. James and Lucy gave their blessing, and the wedding was held at the ranch, a joyful celebration that brought the entire community together. Watching her son marry, Lucy thought about her own wedding day, how nervous she had been, how uncertain. And she thought about how love had transformed everything. Sarah, at 15, announced her intention to become a teacher. She wanted to go to the normal school in Las Cruces and then return to Hachita to teach. Lucy and James, though they would miss her terribly, supported her dream. Daniel, at 10, was still finding his way, but he showed an artistic talent, sketching the ranch and the landscape with impressive skill. As Lucy entered her 40s, she watched her children become adults, watched the ranch continue to thrive, and felt the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. Her stutter was still there, a constant companion, but it had lost its power to shame her. She was Lucy Morrison, wife, mother, rancher, friend. The stutter was just one small part of who she was. James's hair had gone gray at the temples, and there were deep lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But to Lucy, he was as handsome as the day she had first seen him at the Hachita depot. And when he looked at her, his eyes still held that same warmth, that same patience, that same love. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, a ritual they had maintained for over 2 decades, James took Lucy's hand. They sat in their comfortable silence, and then James spoke. "Do you ever regret it? Leaving Boston, coming here, marrying a stranger?" Lucy turned to look at him, surprised by the question. "And never. Not for a single moment. Did you regret sending for me?" "No," James said firmly. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Lucy Morrison. Every single day with you has been a gift." Lucy squeezed his hand. "Why you gave me more than I ever dreamed possible. Why you gave me a voice, even though I sent stutter. Why you gave me a family. You gave me a home. Why you gave me love. You gave me those things too," James said softly. "All of them." They sat together as the sun sank below the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple. From inside the house, they could hear Daniel playing a song on the guitar James had taught him to play. In the distance, cattle lowed, and a coyote called to its mate. Lucy thought about the young woman who had stepped off that stagecoach so many years ago, frightened and stuttering, hoping for basic acceptance. That young woman could never have imagined this life, this deep contentment, this abiding love. Thank you," Lucy whispered. For having all the tea time." "Always," James replied. "For you, I will always have all the time in the world." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Lucy Morrison sat beside her husband, surrounded by the life they had built together, and knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Her words might stumble, but her heart spoke clearly. She was loved, completely and unconditionally. She was home. The years continued their gentle march forward. Thomas and Isabella had children, making Lucy and James grandparents, a role they embraced with joy. Their first grandchild, a girl named Lucy Rose after her grandmother, brought tears to Lucy's eyes when Thomas told them the name. Sarah completed her education and returned to Hachita, opening a school that served the children of the ranching families and townspeople. She was an excellent teacher, patient and creative, and Lucy saw so much of James in her daughter's teaching style. Sarah never married, saying she was married to her students and her books, and Lucy respected her daughter's choice, knowing that fulfillment came in many forms. Daniel pursued his art, eventually making a name for himself with paintings of the New Mexico landscape. His work was shown in galleries in Santa Fe and even some in the East, and though he traveled for exhibitions, he always returned home. The ranch was in his blood, just as it was in all of them. As Lucy and James entered their 60s, they began to slow down. The ranch was mostly managed by Thomas now, with Daniel and Carlos's sons helping. James still rode out most days, unable to fully relinquish the work that had defined his life, but the pace was gentler. Lucy still managed the household, still cooked and cleaned and tended her garden, but she also spent more time writing in her journal, recording the family stories for future generations. Miguel passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, and his death hit them all hard. He had been more than an employee, he had been family. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch he had helped build, and James carved the headstone himself, working for weeks to get it exactly right. More years passed. Lucy and James celebrated their 30th anniversary, then their 40th. Their children gave them a party for the 40th, and nearly 100 people attended, a testament to the lives they had touched and the community they had helped build. Lucy looked around at all the faces: children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, friends, neighbors, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. When Lucy was 68 and James 72, James had a bad fall from his horse. He broke his hip and several ribs, and for the first time in their marriage, Lucy saw real fear in his eyes. Not fear of death, but fear of becoming a burden, of not being able to work, of losing his purpose. But Lucy nursed him back to health with the same patience he had always shown her. She sat by his bedside, reading to him, talking to him, encouraging him through the slow, painful recovery. And just as he had given her all the time she needed with her words, she gave him all the time he needed to heal. "I am slowing you down," James said one difficult day, frustrated with his limited mobility. Lucy took his hand and looked him straight in the eye. "James Morrison, you'll listen to me. You have spent our entire marriage giving me patience and time, and now it is my turn. I have all the time you need. Always." James's eyes filled with tears and he pulled her close. "How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," Lucy said, holding him tight. James did recover, though he walked with a cane afterward and finally, truly retired from the daily ranch work. He spent his days with Lucy and they took slow walks together, sat on the porch for hours, played with their great-grandchildren, and simply enjoyed each other's company. After a lifetime of hard work, they had earned their rest. Lucy's stutter never left, and by now, it never would. But it had become such an integrated part of who she was that she barely noticed it anymore, and neither did anyone else. It was just the way Grandma Lucy talked, and her great-grandchildren would wait patiently, just as their parents and grandparents had learned to do, for her words to come. On a warm spring evening when Lucy was 73 and James 77, they sat on their porch as the sun set, as they had done thousands of times before. James had been quieter than usual that day, reflective. "Lucy," he said softly, "I want you to know something." What is it?" Lucy asked, noting the serious tone in his voice. "If I had my life to live over, I would not change a single thing. Every moment, every choice, every challenge, all of it led me to you and to this life. I could not have asked for more." Lucy felt tears prick her eyes. I feel the same. "You made all my dreams come true, James. Even the dreams I did not know I had." James reached over and took her hand, his grip still strong despite his age. "Promise me something, anything." "When I am gone, and I will go first, I suspect, given the way my body is failing, promise me you will not spend your remaining time grieving. I want you to keep writing, keep spending time with our children and grandchildren, keep living fully. Promise me." "James, do not talk about that," Lucy protested. "Promise me," he insisted gently. Lucy looked at her husband, the man who had been her partner for over 50 years, and nodded. I promise. But you have to promise me something too." "What is that?" Do not leave me for a very long time. I am not ready." James smiled and raised her hand to his lips, kissing it softly as he had done that first evening when they agreed to marry. "I will stay as long as I can, my love, as long as I can." And he did. James lived for 3 more years, years filled with love and laughter and the company of their growing family. His body continued to fail slowly, but his mind remained sharp, and his love for Lucy never diminished. He died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 80 with Lucy beside him, holding his hand. The grief was profound, a physical pain in Lucy's chest. For 53 years, James had been her constant, her partner, her love. The house felt empty without him, the ranch too quiet. But Lucy remembered her promise and she kept it. She continued to write in her journal, recording James's final years, his death, and the memorial service that brought people from all over the territory. She wrote about his kindness, his patience, his unwavering love. She wrote about how he had changed her life, how he had seen her not as broken but as whole, how he had given her the time she needed and in doing so had given her everything. Lucy lived for 7 more years after James's death. She remained in the ranch house, surrounded by family, and though she missed James every single day, she found joy in her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. She saw Thomas's children grow and marry and have children of their own. She attended Sarah's 60th birthday celebration. She displayed Daniel's paintings throughout the house, proud of her son's achievements. On a quiet autumn afternoon, at the age of 80, Lucy Morrison passed away in her sleep in the bedroom she had shared with James for so many years. The family buried her beside her husband on the hill overlooking the ranch, under a sky as big and blue as the day she had first arrived. Thomas, now in his 60s and a grandfather himself, stood at his mother's grave with tears streaming down his face. "She was the strongest person I ever knew," he said to his own children. "She taught me that real strength is not about being loud or forceful. It is about perseverance, about showing up every day, about loving even when it is hard." That evening, the family gathered at the ranch house. Thomas opened his mother's journal, the one his father had given her so many years ago. The pages were filled with her neat handwriting, thousands and thousands of words that had never stuttered on the page. He began to read aloud, starting from the beginning, from those first entries about a frightened young woman stepping off a stagecoach in Hachita, New Mexico territory. The family listened, laughing and crying in equal measure, as Lucy's words brought the past to life. She wrote about love and patience, about finding home in an unexpected place, about a man who had said he had all the time she needed and had meant it. She wrote about children and grandchildren, about loss and joy, about the daily rhythms of ranch life. She wrote about a marriage that had started as an arrangement and had become the greatest love story she could have imagined. On the final page, in an entry written just days before her death, Lucy had written, "If I could go back and speak to that young woman on the stagecoach, I would tell her not to be afraid. I would tell her that she is about to meet a man who will change everything, who will show her that love is not about perfection, but about acceptance. I would tell her that her stutter will not matter to him, that he will wait for every word, that he will give her all the time she needs. I would tell her that she is going to be so happy, happier than she ever dreamed possible. And I would tell her that when she steps off that stagecoach and hears him say I have all the time, she should believe him, because he does. He really does." Thomas closed the journal carefully, holding it close to his chest. "They loved each other well," he said softly. "That is what matters in the end. They loved each other well." The family agreed, and as the evening deepened and they shared stories about Lucy and James, the ranch house filled with warmth and laughter. The love that James and Lucy had built together lived on in their descendants, in the values they had passed down, in the very land beneath their feet. The ranch continued to thrive, passed from generation to generation, each one adding their own chapter to the story. But at its foundation was always the memory of James and Lucy Morrison, the patient rancher and the mail-order bride who stuttered, who had found each other across a vast distance and had built something beautiful together. Their story became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The journal Lucy had kept was preserved carefully, and whenever a member of the Morrison family faced difficulty or doubt, they would open it and read her words, finding strength and courage in her story. And on the hill where James and Lucy were buried, wildflowers grew thick every spring, planted originally by their children and maintained by their grandchildren and great-grandchildren and beyond. The headstones were simple, bearing their names and dates and a single inscription that Thomas had chosen. Together, they had all the time they needed. Because, in the end, that was the truth. James had given Lucy the gift of patience, and she had given him the gift of love. Together, they had built a life, a family, and a legacy that would endure far beyond their years. They had proven that love does not require perfection, only acceptance. They had shown that the best things in life are worth waiting for. And somewhere in the vast New Mexico sky, under the same stars that had witnessed their first evening together on the porch, under the same moon that had risen over their wedding night, under the same sun that had warmed their faces through decades of life together, the spirit of their love lived on, patient and enduring, a testament to what two people can create when one says, "I stutter," and the other says, "I have all the time." The end.